What happens when a high-profile guest completely loses control during a live television interview, forcing the host to make an unprecedented decision that shocks millions of viewers? You're about to witness one of the most jaw-dropping moments in morning television history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below. This story will leave you speechless. Michael Strahan had been hosting Good Morning America for years and thought he had seen it all. Difficult guests, awkward moments, technical glitches, you name it. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold that morning. Producers were thrilled to book Meghan Markle for an exclusive segment. It was meant to be routine, a promotional appearance, the kind that fills time slots and generates social media buzz. Michael reviewed his notes in the makeup chair, everything seemingly normal. The studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as crew members adjusted lighting and tested microphones. Meghan had arrived on time, gone through hair and makeup without incident, and exchanged pleasantries with staff. Her publicist provided the standard list of approved topics. Nothing seemed off-limits or controversial. 5 minutes to air, called the floor director. Michael made his way to the interview area. 2 comfortable chairs were angled for natural conversation, with a small table between them adorned with fresh flowers. Morning light streamed through the studio windows, creating the perfect ambience for what should have been a pleasant interview. Meghan took her seat, adjusting her outfit and checking her reflection in the monitor. She smiled warmly as the sound technician clipped a microphone to her lapel. Everything appeared on track. The countdown began, and Michael slipped into professional mode, the same confident demeanor that had made him a beloved television personality. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Strahan, and we have a very special guest today," he began, flashing his signature smile to the cameras. "Joining us is Meghan Markle. We're excited to talk with her about her latest projects and initiatives." "Meghan, thank you so much for being here." "Thank you for having me, Michael," Meghan responded, her voice polished and familiar. "I'm delighted to be here." The first few minutes went exactly as planned. Michael asked about her charitable work, upcoming projects, and social issues. Meghan's responses were articulate, hitting all the expected talking points. The interview flowed smoothly, and the studio felt relaxed. Behind the cameras, producers nodded approvingly, but then, the dynamic shifted. Michael, following his prepared questions, asked an innocuous follow-up about her experience with different media outlets, and how she approached interviews differently. "Well, Michael," Meghan began, her tone suddenly sharper, "it's important to acknowledge that not all interviews are created equal, and frankly, not all interviewers can handle certain conversations with the nuance they require." Michael's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he maintained composure. This wasn't entirely unexpected. Subtle critiques of the media happened all the time. He decided to probe further, anticipating an insightful discussion about media literacy. "That's an interesting perspective. Meghan, can you elaborate? What makes for a more effective interview dynamic in your experience?" Instead of a thoughtful response, Meghan's expression hardened. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a serious register that immediately changed the atmosphere. "What I mean, Michael, is that some interviewers understand complex issues, and others are better suited for less demanding content. Sports commentary, for instance, requires a very different skill set than discussing matters of real social importance." The comment hung in the air. Michael felt the energy shift dramatically. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged concerned glances. This was heading somewhere unplanned and not positive. Michael, experienced in handling live surprises, addressed it to, "I appreciate that perspective, Meghan, though I'd say many in broadcasting have covered a wide range of topics throughout their careers. The beauty of this format is exploring different subjects and learning from our guests' expertise." Instead of backing down, Meghan doubled down, her tone increasingly pointed and aggressive. "That's exactly what I mean, Michael," she said. "The tendency to oversimplify complex issues, to treat everything as if it's the same level of importance. When someone like me comes on to discuss serious matters that affect real people, I expect to speak with someone who understands the gravity, not someone whose primary experience is talking batting averages and touchdown passes." Michael's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but his training kicked in. He had faced difficult guests before, but never one who so blatantly insulted his expertise on live television. Camera operators continued filming, uncertain whether to cut away. The studio fell silent except for the low hum of equipment and Meghan's increasingly aggressive tone. "Meghan, I think there might be a misunderstanding here," Michael replied, voice steady despite provocation. "We invited you to have a respectful conversation about your work and initiatives. I'm not sure where this hostility is coming from, but perhaps we could refocus on the topics you'd like to discuss." Instead of acknowledging her misstep, Meghan interpreted his diplomacy as weakness. She leaned back, shaking her head dismissively. "This is exactly what I mean, Michael. The inability to engage with challenging ideas, the immediate retreat to safe, superficial topics when a conversation gets real. This intellectual timidity is why certain media personalities are unsuitable for serious discourse." The insult was unmistakable now, and the tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Michael's co-hosts, seated at the main desk, looked stunned. The floor director was frantically signaling the control room, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the disaster unfold live. Michael drew a deep breath. Professionalism warring with the natural human reaction to being so publicly disrespected. He had built his career on grace, patience, and finding ways to make even the most difficult interviews work. But this was unlike anything he'd encountered. And he knew, continuing to stay overly diplomatic would only invite more aggression. "Meghan, I'm going to stop you right there," Michael said, his voice firmer but composed. "I've treated you with nothing but respect since you walked into this studio. I invited you here to share your message with our viewers. What you're doing now isn't just unprofessional, it's disrespectful to everyone who works on this show and to the people watching at home." For a moment, it seemed his directness might restore some sanity. But instead of acknowledging she'd gone too far, Meghan's agitation only intensified. She shifted in her chair, posture hardening, ready to escalate further. "Disrespectful," Meghan repeated, voice rising slightly. "What's disrespectful, Michael, is pretending that all opinions and expertise are equally valuable. What's disrespectful is putting someone like me, someone with lived experience and real insights, into a position where surface-level questions and superficial commentary are supposed to count as meaningful journalism." Michael's patience thinned, but he tried one last time to salvage professionalism for the sake of viewers and colleagues. "Meghan, if there are specific topics you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to pivot, but I will not sit here while you continue insulting me, my background, or the work of everyone here." Instead of calming, Meghan leaned forward, eyes narrowing, preparing to deliver the final straw. "You see, this is exactly the problem with people in your position, Michael. You think pivoting topics fixes the real issue. You can't just change the subject to cover up being out of your depth on matters of substance. This isn't about topics, it's about intellectual capacity." The studio went silent. Even the hum of cameras seemed to fade. Michael's face shifted from patient diplomacy to barely contained anger. His professional mask slipped slightly. "Are you seriously questioning my intellectual capacity on live television?" he asked, voice low but intense. "Are you sitting in my studio, as my guest, suggesting that I am intellectually inferior to you?" Instead of retreating, Meghan leaned back with a smug expression, convinced she had gained the upper hand. "I'm not suggesting anything, Michael. I'm stating that some people are equipped for complex discussions, while others are better suited to lighter fare. There's nothing wrong with knowing your limitations, but there is something wrong with pretending they don't exist." Michael stared at her, weighing his next move. His jaw tightened, hands gripping the arms of his chair. When he spoke again, his voice carried authority that commanded every eye in the room. "Let me tell you something, Meghan, and I want you to listen carefully. I've been in broadcasting for over 2 decades. I've covered everything: natural disasters, political elections, human interest stories, breaking news that changed the world. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel laureates, activists, artists, and yes, athletes, because they're human beings with stories worth telling. You walked into this studio as my guest. I treated you with respect. I prepared thoughtful questions. I gave you a platform to share your message. And for the last several minutes, you've been insulting, not just me, but everyone who works here. And now you question my intellectual capacity." In the control room, producers buzzed. Some argued to cut to commercial immediately. Others insisted they let Michael finish. They realized they were witnessing television history. Michael stood, towering over Meghan, who suddenly looked smaller and less confident. His movement was deliberate. Every word carried the weight of experience and genuine anger. "I've had enough. Meghan, this interview is over. Not because I can't handle difficult topics, but because I refuse to provide a platform for someone who thinks being disrespectful and insulting is the same as intelligent discourse. You're done here." For the first time, Meghan looked genuinely shocked. She glanced around the studio, realizing her behavior might have consequences. When she looked back at Michael, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. "You can't just end an interview because you don't like what I'm saying," she protested, her voice weaker now. "This is supposed to be a professional conversation." Michael's response was swift, sharp, and undeniable, every word carrying the authority of someone who meant exactly what he said. "You're right, Meghan," he began, voice steady but charged. "This was supposed to be a professional conversation, but you decided to turn it into something else entirely. A personal attack. You insulted my intelligence, my background, my experience, all while sitting as a guest on my show. That's not professional discourse. That's cruelty disguised as arrogance." The studio was tense, the air thick. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something unprecedented in morning television history. Meghan's composure, long a mask of confidence, began to crumble. She scanned the room, looking for support from crew or producers, only to meet faces filled with shock and disapproval. Her arrogance was fading, replaced by a flicker of panic. "Michael, I think you're overreacting," she said, her voice cracking with desperation. "We're having a spirited discussion about important issues. Isn't that what good television is? Challenging conversations that push boundaries." Michael shook his head, unwavering, his patience gone. When he spoke, every word carried finality. "No, Meghan, that's not what this was. A spirited discussion requires mutual respect and genuine engagement with ideas. What you did was hide personal attacks behind a veneer of intellectual superiority. You didn't challenge my questions, you attacked my character and competence. There's a world of difference between the two." Meghan tried once more, fumbling to regain control. "I was simply trying to elevate the conversation beyond superficial pleasantries," she said, voice trembling. "Sometimes progress requires uncomfortable honesty about limitations." Michael's eyes narrowed, and his voice cut like steel. "Uncomfortable honesty? Is that what you call telling me my background makes me unfit to interview you? That my experience in sports somehow disqualifies me from meaningful journalism? No, Meghan, that's not honesty, that's arrogance. That's disrespect." The studio was silent, save for their voices. Cameras rolled, instinctively capturing a moment that would be remembered for years. Producers behind the scenes scrambled, debating whether to cut or let history play out live. Meghan's last desperate attempt came as a plea. "Michael, please, maybe we should take a step back and find some common ground. I didn't mean to offend personally." Michael's expression hardened, a mix of disappointment and resolve. His voice was calm, deliberate, and final. "The time for diplomacy was when you first sat down. The time for finding common ground was when I welcomed you, gave you the opportunity to share your message respectfully. You chose a different path. You chose to make it personal. You chose to insult. You chose contempt for this platform and everyone associated with it." He paused, locking eyes with the camera. "Speaking to viewers at home, I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between a challenging conversation and a personal attack. I've interviewed people I disagreed with, people who pushed back hardened. I made those interviews work because they were rooted in respect. What happened here today? That was not one of them." Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but Michael pressed on, voice growing firmer with each word. "You questioned my intellectual capacity. You dismissed my professional experience. You told me I was unfit to conduct this interview, all while using my platform and speaking to my audience. That's not challenging discourse. That's bad behavior, and I will not tolerate it." The finality in his tone was unmistakable. The conversation was over. Meghan, however, seemed unable to accept it. She stayed seated, eyes darting around the studio, searching for intervention or a lifeline. "So, what happens now?" she whispered, her voice fragile, almost defeated. "You're just going to cut this short because you didn't like my tone?" Meghan demanded, her voice laced with disbelief. Michael didn't hesitate. His reply was immediate, firm, and absolute. There was no room for negotiation. "What happens now is this. You leave. This interview is over. This segment is done. Gather your things and go. I've given you more chances than you deserve to conduct yourself professionally, and you've refused every single one. I will not provide another opportunity for you to insult me or anyone else who works here." For a moment, Meghan sat frozen, as if the reality of being asked to leave hadn't fully registered. When she finally rose, her movements were hesitant, awkward, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had walked into the studio less than an hour ago. "This is unprecedented," she stammered, voice wavering between shock and indignation. "I've never been treated like this during an interview." Michael's reply was calm, deliberate, and final, the voice of someone fully resolved in both decision and reasoning. "Maybe that's true because you've never behaved this way before. Or maybe other hosts were willing to tolerate behavior I refuse to accept. Either way, this conversation is finished." Meghan gathered her belongings slowly, security discreetly trailing behind her as she made her way to the exit. Michael turned toward the camera. Expression softened, but voice still weighted with the gravity of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with the rest of today's show." Sometimes, in live television, things don't go according to plan, but we always strive to maintain the standards of respect and professionalism that you, our viewers, deserve. The camera lingered on his face, capturing a mix of resolve and disappointment, reflecting the extraordinary circumstances that had just unfolded. As the broadcast cut to commercial, the studio remained silent, everyone still absorbing the unprecedented events they had witnessed. "What do you think of Michael Strahan's handling of this impossible situation? Was he right to end the interview, or could he have managed his difficult guest differently?" Subscribe and leave a comment below to share what you would have done in his shoes.